Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Conversations That Matter podcast. This is a Trail Talk edition. I am in the beautiful Shawangunk Mountains near my house, and I've been cooped up in my office the last few days, so I thought when I got up this morning and saw how beautiful it was, I would take a few hours and come here. I love coming here and do some hiking and walking and resting and praying and reading and all of that. So as I was doing this, I thought to myself, I've been mulling over this idea of brand and how to understand the evangelical landscape through an understanding of brand. And I think it's a fairly original thought. I haven't heard anyone else talk about this. And for me, it's really helped me understand, I think, what's happening right now in evangelicalism. And I've gotten questions about this, about certain organizations, why is there friction, it seems like, between G3 and Christian nationalists? That's one of the latest ones. But there have been other situations where it seems like certain groups won't talk to other groups. There's no cross-pollination. There's an insularity, and it seems like this would be a time when everyone should be working together. Our threats have never been more great, at least, I don't want to say never, but in our generation, our lifetime, whoever's listening, the threats against Christianity in general have never been greater, and yet the fragmentation has never been more. And it's kind of a weird situation, wouldn't you think? And I think that's what a lot of people are asking about. So I want to share with you a thought on this and see what you have to say. If you have comments, if you have questions, please put them in the info section or the comment section. And that will greatly help me because I might actually write about this. We'll see. I want to start off with just an understanding of brand and fashion. So I've come to understand, contrary to the way that I think the world should work, but realizing how the world actually works, that many people, including myself, tend to respond very positively to certain things and not positively to other things, not necessarily based fully upon whether we are in agreement, but also because of something called fashion. And brand is I guess you could say, a symbolic rallying point for certain fashions. And so, why do I wear the shirt that I'm wearing now? Why do I listen to the people I listen to? Why do I associate with certain people and not with other people? Why do I like certain music? There's all these things that, all these questions that I think can be somewhat answered when we understand brand and fashion. And so I see it this way. Let's think about it from a business angle. When you are trying to sell clothes, let's say, and there's certain styles of clothes that you have to, in order to sell those clothes, you have to be particular. You have to set yourself apart from other styles. And you do that by branding. That our store has this brand, and we sell this style, and the kinds of people you want to be like come here and buy clothes here, right? That's branding. And we understand this, I think, in the business world. You have to, with competition, show that your product is superior, but not just that it's superior, but that you are the people who frequent your shop are the kinds of people that are good people, the people you want to be like, the cool people. And this has been going on, obviously, for a long time. But I think people need to realize that even business brands, having branding in business and so forth, there's something somewhat modern about that. Now we have it in other arenas. It's not just businesses, it's ministries, it's churches, which is what we'll talk about today. It's everything. Everything's got an icon, everything has a brand. And I don't think that's all wrong, by the way. But it's the world we live in. So how did we get here? Well, one of the things I think that contributed to this is that during the Industrial Revolution, but really for the last few hundred years, people have been moving from agrarian, rural areas to more urban settings. And in that process of moving, a lot of social bonds were broken. Organic communities were destroyed. Roger Scruton talks about this time being a time when people were expressing themselves in art in very lonely ways because they were surrounded by all these people. You would think that they would have more opportunity to be engaged in social activities, and yet this was a time when they felt the most detached. The obligations and the security that came with living in a place for centuries or at least decades with the same families in the same area, ties to the land, that was all wiped away. And so people were in a situation moving to the cities where they no longer were required to get along with their neighbors and family members, and they didn't have to marry into the same families and things like that. So they were free to associate with whoever they would choose to associate with. Now, this created a situation where you had superficial relationships with coworkers, perhaps, and you had relationships with people that you had shared interests, maybe a hobby club of some kind. And I think, you think of like Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. A lot of the attraction to various people was predicated on a personality that could even be projected. And so, this is all new. This is in world history. This is a new phenomenon, and people are arranging themselves differently than they did before this urbanization took place. Now, I think this is crucial to understanding where we are now, because not only did urbanization happen, and urbanization, just so people know, this isn't about just rural moving to the cities. It's moving to cities and megatropolises or megalopolises, whatever you call it. I mean, huge cities on a scale that has never been, we've never seen cities this big. So that's what's going on, and that's been going on for a while, quite some time. So people are in these urban areas, and now they have technology. Now they can communicate quickly. They don't really have silence and reflection because they're constantly interrupted. We have cell phones now, of course. There's distraction all around us and things that are stimulating us and getting our attention. And so we're constantly in this, we basically have megatropolis or metropolis in our pocket all the time. We have, the city is with us, even in rural areas. I mean, I'm using my phone to record this right now. I have it on Do Not Disturb, but I have it with me, and most people don't put it on Do Not Disturb. So they're reachable 24/7. So we have all this connectivity, but so much of it is superficial. It's mediated through barriers. It's right now, you're even watching this or listening to this probably on a device with a flat surface. And I'm not really there with you. I'm not seeing your reaction, but you're given the impression, at least, that it might feel in a way like I am. And so, there's blessings to this. Obviously, I wouldn't be recording something like this if I didn't think that, but there's also downsides to this. And people, I think, who have these communities fractured, who are stimulated and distracted all the time by superficial things, tend to, there tends to be a sense of a lack of depth and a lack of rootedness and a need for belonging and a need for stability and a need for leadership, because all these things have been destroyed. And so what do? They rally around certain things. They need a new rallying point, and that happens to be, at least one of the things, is brand loyalty. Instead of region or family loyalty, there's brand loyalty. And there's security in being part of the brand. And so I think if we start off with this understanding, then a lot of what's happened in the last few years in evangelicalism starts to make more sense. And I just challenge people. I know there's going to be some who will be sensitive to this, and I'm trying my best to be as nice as I can. I really want to just explain this as best I can, and I'm not trying to whack anyone. But I will say this: the latest controversy in this vein that sparked me into thinking this is the controversy between G3 and Christian nationalism. And I don't want to go into the details of that. That's not the point of this. I want to get behind that and ask another question. What broadly is going on in evangelicalism that could, I'm not accusing anyone in particular, but what could be something that would motivate, let's say, a sensitivity to one's brand being encroached upon? If you think of G3 as a brand, right? And I think of, let me pick an organization that I admire and I followed for a long time. Let's pick, John MacArthur, Grace to You, Shepherd's Conference, Master's Seminary, all that stuff. There are people, we call them MacArthurites, who build their lives around this. Everything is about John MacArthur, and it's bigger than a man at that point. It's not even about the man. It's about this industry that's built up around him. And you can assess whether or not you're going to get along with someone based upon whether or not they also are part of that brand and wear that label on their sleeve. Do they listen to John MacArthur? Do they like Getty music or whatever? Do they also attend these conferences? If they were going to go to seminary, wouldn't they go to Masters, right? That's the kind of stuff. It provides security. It provides, like, you think, well, I have something in common with this person. We're part of the same. We wear the same shirt. We're the same kind of people. We identify with one another, right? So that's what, maybe that'll give a better window into what I'm thinking of when I say brand and I apply it to ministry. In fact, churches today, they don't have steeples or Gothic arches or crosses as much as they do now brand icons that they make. And they think this is purposeful. They're intentionally trying not to look like a church and look more like a business because everything's going that direction. So anyway, that's what's going on broadly speaking. Now, to pick this just recent example, if you had a major ministry and a brand, and you were trying to build that brand, you're trying to expand into all these new places, you're trying to build apps and have conferences and workshops and church networks and whatever else, I don't know, all the stuff that everyone who has this ability to do it is trying to do. Because let's just face it, there's a vacuum of leadership. There's a demand for leadership, and there's just not there's not the supply. And so if you can supply that, or at least even give the impression that you can supply that, not only is there money to be made there, but there's influence. And that's not all bad, by the way. That's not all bad. That's just a description of the situation that we're in. And I think we should be aware of it. Now, currently, just think with me about this for a moment. See if you think what I'm saying is true. Doug Wilson in Moscow, Idaho, and that whole brand is growing by leaps and bounds. People are moving there. They have new organizations popping up over there. They are, and they've been ostracized by just about every other major evangelical institution. There really isn't much cross-pollination going on there. There's not a lot of cooperation with them and other major groups, like G3, for example. And by the way, if someone wants to fact check me and say, John, there was this one time when they did, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen at all or never happened. I don't know. But in general, there's walls there. There's obviously a barrier. And this is how branding works. Some people shop at some stores. Some people shop at other stores. So you have some speakers at these conferences, some speakers at those conferences. Some people attend those conferences and some people don't. That's just how it works, all right? So again, that's just a description. But let's say that this Doug Wilson's brand is growing. And the reason for it is because there has been such a lack of leadership, and Wilson seems to show a spine sometimes, and so that attracts people. I think it's really not much more complicated than that, to be quite honest. I'm sure there's other things, but that's really what you need today, more than anything else. And so his brand, let's say, and he may not even think of it as a brand, but let's just say, call it what it is. There's an industry around him that's gaining a lot of followers. And this threatens the other brands, right? Think about it from, again, clothing stores. Like if more people are going into Old Navy, then Aeropostale has a problem. And they've got to button down the hatches. They got to figure out how they're going to deal with this. And so you look for others, if you see that, let's say, there's another ministry or another store or something that's going under, you're thinking of ways, well, how do I get those people to come to me? And how do I show that we're superior to this other store, this other brand? And in Christianity, that's very delicate because you don't want to be seen as too mean. That's a very hard thing to do. So you can only attack things that aren't able to defend themselves as well. And if you attack something that's too big, or if you say something that's too mean, it is, and it's a secondary theological matter, because again, remember I said we have bigger threats now than we've ever had to Christianity in general. So if you end up fighting people who are under those same threats, and you could cooperate, but you don't cooperate, it looks bad. So you have to go after things that are actually, quote unquote gospel issues or heresy, or, really, really important, and preferably against people who can't damage your brand that much. They don't have the power to do it. And I'm thinking about this way from a business angle, and then applying it to the evangelical world seems to make a lot of sense to me. It at least makes more sense of what we're seeing, because frankly, I was having a hard time. I was like, wait a minute, we're like, who cares whose kingdom is built? Because we're all trying to build God's kingdom here. Who cares who gets the glory or credit? Like, if this podcast that you're listening to goes away, let my name decrease and his increase, right? That's not how it works with branding, though. So anyway, getting back to this discussion on the Christian nationalism debate and all that. You have this brand that's being built, the Moscow brand, and theonomy is part of that, I suppose. Postmillennialism is definitely part of that. Presbyterianism, to some extent, is part of this. And how do you, if people are being attracted to this brand, which, and again, I think it comes down to strength. I don't think it's those things. I think people are adopting those things. But I think I don't think that's the first thing that's propelling them into adopting these things. It's just like students who want to be like their teachers, right? They have an admiration, and then they adopt certain ways that their teacher communicates or whatever. So anyway, I think that's what's happening there. And not saying that people who adopt these theologies don't have these convictions. I'm just saying that I think on a broad level, that explains better why people are jumping, especially young men, to this post-millennial position without even studying it in depth. But they've heard someone they admire express it in articulate ways, okay? So that's what's happening. And that's how most of the world works. It's fashion. It's identity. It's brand. It used to be mostly in families and regions and so forth. And now, again, it's more in branding than it is those things. So if someone's cutting in on your audience, or they're a threat in that way, you have to build walls. You have to keep your audience and try to prevent them from getting your members. And even just thinking about this has been public, but you have like Desiring God just had Joe Rigney leave, not Desiring God, but the Bethlehem Baptist Seminary, the seminary connected to the church. You had Jared Longshore leave Founders Ministries, both Baptists, but they both went where? To Moscow, to Idaho. So this is happening in real time. Now, because brands tend to draw these rigid lines, I think this is the reason that they function often as ideologies. And I mean something fairly specific by that. Ideologies are simple precepts that explain everything, that give you the key to understanding everything. And so everything gets kind of flattened. And this works well with brands because there's not a lot of, on the front end, understanding you need to have to accept an ideology. You just have to understand a few basic things, and then you're part of the group, and you're able to distinguish yourself from everyone who's not part of that ideology. And so people do this all the time. Like the MacArthurite thing is basically, I think, turning John MacArthur almost into this abstraction. He's not even a man anymore. It's an ideology. I think that there is, and I'm just going to say, this is hard for me to articulate. I see it, but it's hard for me to say it. There is this sort of ecclesiastical ideology, and I've run into this in many places, that looks at the church as almost, I guess, an abstraction. That everything is about the church. That our identity should be wrapped up in the church. If the church is open, we should be at the church. We should filter all our social activities through the church. We should filter our life decisions through church leadership, right? And it's the local church, and the local church becomes, it's easy to do this, to make it an ideology, to make it something. It is important, obviously, but that's not everything. It's not everything about us that makes us who we are, that confers identity, that's important for us to focus on. It's one thing, but when it's inflated and it's given so much preference that you get, the ultimate end of this, I suppose, would be a cult. So that's the extreme form, but there is this ideological kind of ecclesiastical ideology that I've noticed, and I think I've sensed this, and I could definitely pull some examples. I don't want to do that. I'm more so trying to give everyone a framework rather than the specific examples, because I really don't want to get into the weeds into a fight on this if I can avoid it. So let me say it this way. I've seen people connected to some of these conservative ministries that are not Moscow, conservative Christian ministries, adopt elements of this, specifically making the church into an ideology. Now, by the way, there's conservative elements that make the family into an ideology too. I think that's the danger if you're in like a family integrated church. You just got to be careful that you don't go too far into that and make the family everything, and everything's filtered to the family, and the husband or the father is the one who makes all decisions. And like if you can get pretty weird. So again, I'm not saying I'm not knocking family integration, and I'm not knocking the local church. I'm just saying when those things are made into abstractions or ideologies, they lose their purpose, and the people who end up doing it become more narrow, combative, and they're not the kind of people I generally like to hang out with. Just put it that way, because it's like you have to be like totally on their team on this issue, and or else like you're missing like everything. You're just not. They can't even work with you. So anyway, I see that as one of a driving influence, and in order to, I think with Moscow and Doug Wilson's project in Idaho, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it, whatever that is, that industry that's built up around Doug Wilson, I think they have a little bit more of a, like their view on Christian engagement is a little broader. Actually, it may be a lot broader than the ideologues when it comes to ecclesiology. And it's much more holistic. There's much more, I mean, you have the classical Christian school movement kind of coming out of there. You have political, Cross Politic, I think was one of the first shows that they had on their app. You have all this stuff happening there that's beyond. Now, there's pitfalls for everything, so there might even be some pitfalls in this, which isn't for this particular podcast. This isn't, I'm not trying to just praise Moscow or anything like that, just so people know. I'm just trying to explain it. But there is a broader emphasis that they have, and part of that has played into the Christian nationalism debate. They published Stephen Wolfe's book, Canon Press did, and they've been comfortable adopting the label Christian nationalist, and they've had major media go there to talk about Christian nationalism. And so this, I think, is a weak point in the minds of some, especially those who have the brand, let's get back to branding, of I'm about the local church. I'm about ecclesiology. It's all about the local church and elders. And those people over there aren't. And there's other distinctions between them, but I'm just saying this is one distinction, and I think it came out here. They're getting into these other areas, and it's threatening the integrity of the local church. It's because that's what we should be focused on, not building a Christian culture or anything like that. We should be building churches, not cultures. And so I think that you see this in the secular world But I think you see this in the church, where if you have competition like that, you tend to draw hard lines, you tend to proclaim your authority, and you become loud. There's really, and I'm talking about in the secular world, there's little room for truth or nuance when this happens. And it all becomes like a rallying point of, we're about our brand. And that's about it. It can be aggressive. And this is how businesses compete with one another. This is how secular politics also works. It's personalities and brand, and this actually took me longer than I care to admit to grasp this, even in politics, because I thought it should all be about truth, and I'm like, oh, it's all about truth though. Like, we're all committed to that, right? And it's actually been fairly recently that I finally, it's been over time. I've had experiences where I realized it wasn't, but it's fairly recently where I've really just become so, red-pilled on this, to borrow a phrase, a popular phrase right now, and see it in every area. That's been a fairly recent thing for me. I still tend to go back to it should all be about truth. And that's just not the way often the world works. It's about who you associate with. It's about brand. It's about fashion. And you have to mark your territory. You have to make sure that you're seen in a certain way, so you project this image of yourself and your company, or your ministry as the case may be, and you draw sharp distinctions between yourself and others, even when it's not maybe necessary, or it's not needed. And that's, I think, for me, what's explained a lot of what I've seen now over the course of now years. Because there's a bunch of things I didn't understand, and I didn't know how to even articulate it to you, I want to say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the woke stuff was happening. I didn't understand why certain ministries were failing to take hard stands and name names. I thought we should all be about truth. So why aren't they doing this? And then only to see some people start to name some names that were acceptable to name after the tilling had been done. And, like Russell Moore, Beth Moore, David French, people that had been so exposed that it became safe to name them, because you knew that there's going to be a large group of people who would agree with you if you did that, and you'd gain support. It might even be to your advantage. That didn't make sense to me at first. I thought, well, they're just saying, they're compromising the gospel. They're saying lies over here. They're leading sheep astray. Let's go shoot the wolves. Let's at least warn the sheep. Right? And there were people who did do that, but there were also those who did not, and I couldn't figure it out. And then the more you get into, I think, the evangelical world, the more you realize that, like most other things, there's a business element to this. And you just have to be aware of that. It's just the way the world works. That's how it is. And it takes a lot of integrity, a lot of strength, endurance, honesty, transparency to be in even that world, and to do so in a way that's not self-serving, that's about truth, that has a wider vision than just your denomination or your organization or your missions agency or whatever. It takes a special kind of person that God's equipped to be in leadership positions in those organizations. And in most of these organizations, we tend to have people who are managers, right? Think of business managers. And so they're managing a brand. They have to manage image. They have to project image. They have to beat competition. All of these things are necessary things in order to run major ministries. And the higher the levels you get, the more this becomes prevalent. So, should Christians be in major ministries? Yeah, I think you can be. I think you just got to be very aware of this kind of thing and very careful of it, and just realize God brings the increase, and it's not your strategies aren't the things that are going to grow your ministries. I'm not saying don't strategize, but just, realize that the increase is going to come from the Lord. So these thoughts are not quite complete, but it's incomprehensive, but it is, I think, a start to understanding some of this. And perhaps I'm just applying something that's already been known in the business world to something in the Christian ministry world, the evangelical world. And if so, then that's fine. But I wanted everyone to hear this so that I could get feedback. So if you have feedback about it, if you think I'm totally wrong, that I'm out in left field, let me know. I'd love to hear that. I'm about the truth. I want to know what's actually explains what we've seen the last few years. Some of you don't know exactly what I'm talking about in every way. But those who have been podcast listeners for a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Why ministries have behaved the way that they behave. I think that this might go a long way to understanding some of it. And to bring it to a close, the real test that I would ask is, if it's good for the kingdom, would you be okay with people going somewhere else, associating with others, being part of a different brand? That's the test to find out if you're part of a brand in a way. If it's good for, even on the local church level, you could say, is it good for the kingdom of God for them to go to this other church? If it is, then you may be disappointed, but you should be for it. It shouldn't be something that makes you bitter or makes you, jaded or makes you jealous or makes you insecure or makes you want to, shore up the brand, because it's about the kingdom of God, and the kingdom of God isn't a brand. So have your brands. That's fine. Even in ministries, you can have a certain like style or whatever. These people congregate here and we do this kind of thing. But just realize that doesn't replace the actual invisible church. It doesn't replace local community. It doesn't replace family. It doesn't replace all the things that God has given us in organic ways. In fact, what it should do is it should support those things. It should help us love those things more. And if it's not doing that, then it really has no business existing. Ministries for ministry's sake don't have a point to them, right? They serve a purpose, and that purpose is to assist churches, to assist families, to assist individual Christians. And, as the case may be, to disciple people who might even run for politics and need to know how to guide a country with just laws. That's where the Christian nationalism debate all comes in. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed Trail Talk, because I sure do. This is just beautiful. There's some great lookouts that I guess they're coming up. So you don't get to see them today. I'll have to do another Trail Talk so you get to see the lookouts. But this is a beautiful day in the forest, to say the least. God bless. More coming. Bye now.